Okay, so this is going to be a brief walkthrough of the level 1 of the data processing applications. First step, we're going to browse to the directory that contains our raw data files. It'll be this folder here. Select that and bring it into the app. In this case, the test has already been processed, so the data fields are already filled out. They would, of course, be blank if this was a first time running the test data. Test information will go in this first section, an area for atmospheric conditions, information about the fuel, general comments about the test, and then any specific comments about the individual phases will go here. And then finally, the specific recorded data from each phase will get entered into its applicable section. Fields have been color coded in an effort to ensure that all the required fields get filled out, which are highlighted in green. The yellow highlights are suggested fields, so in many test conditions, there would be a value for these. In this case, we only used one fuel. There was not a fuel 2, so we can leave that blank. Once our test information has been filled in its entirety for all the phases that were ran, we can go down and enter weighting information. So in this case, we ran a high power phase, no medium power phase, and a low power phase. So the total weighting will be 2. We'll run with the entered inputs, which then brings us to the menu tab where we can start doing our calculations. Energy calculations will be first. We can click on step 1 here. When that button turns green, we know that the calculations are complete. We can head over to the tab up top and see our outputs. Head back over to the menu, and we will do a sensor calibration adjustment. So depending on which sensor box and which firmware version we're using, the calibration values need to change. In this case, we're using sensor box 3002. We'll click OK, and that button has gone green, so we know that we're okay to proceed to the next step. We did not do any gas checks. This is an optional step, so we'll skip that and move on to subtract background. This will bring up a dialog box where we can adjust the start and end times of each phase, as well as the pre and post background phases. You can see the portions of the graph here highlighted in red. This is the pre-test background, and then the post-test background phase will be here. It's important to try to find a nice flat portion of the graph to use for your background, in which case we'll use the pre-post lin subtraction method. Otherwise, there are options if there's not a flat, clean portion of background to subtract. So we'll click OK, save those changes, close that dialog, and close our plots. Subtract background has now gone green, so we know that we're okay again to continue on. Gravimetric data will be next. In this case, we did use filters for this test, so we can enter the ID number for our filter for high power. If we use medium power and low power, would go down here, as well as the tare mass and the gross mass of each individual filter, or the clean and loaded weights. Click OK, button's gone green, so we can check our gravimetric outputs, information about phase time, PM, etc. Back to menu. Next step will be to calculate emissions. If defaults need to be changed, there's some information here. Otherwise, we're going to leave that default value at 3. Click OK. You can see it processing in the background there. Button's gone green. We can go and check our emissions calculations tab. And again, we've got a nice table with all of our calculated outputs. Back to the menu. We will not be doing a custom time period in this example. So next step will be to view all outputs, which will give us all of our calculated outputs in one nice convenient chart, including the ISO results. Back to the menu, the last really handy function of the level 1 app is the ability to plot the different phases of the test. Or in this case, we can do the full length. You can do individual high, medium, or low power phase. We'll go for the full test, click OK. We're going to close this blank graph for just a moment, head over to the plot tab up top, and here we can specify our variables as well as change their color or scale if need be. In this case, we'll keep it simple. Just plot CO in blue, CO2 in red, and PM in black. You can scroll down to the very, very bottom, click OK, and this will update our plot, which has no variables currently, to this. We can then use our scaling tools to zoom in and out a bit more appropriately. And there we have a nice plot of our entire test, which we can use to do further data analysis. Close that down, and that is the level 1 app in a nutshell.